Welcome to A Duty to Act with your host, Jennifer Darling.
Hey everybody, it's Jennifer with A Duty to Act podcast. I'm super excited to be back in the studio recording today. We've taken a couple of months off while I finished up school. We finished out the year and then started planning for this year. This is the first episode for 2025, and we're going to kick it off with Josh, my wonderful husband, A Duty to Act podcast producer, and my partner in crime.
Howdy do.
So this topic tonight, we're going to be talking about activating your community through social media. Mm-hmm. And Josh is uniquely qualified to talk about this because he is a data scientist. He works on content analytics, and part of that is looking at social media content and examining how well the marketing strategies are working using social media.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So,
all kinds of content all the time.
Okay. It's an interesting thing to talk about, the idea of marketing public service agencies, because historically we've never had to market ourselves. People have entered the field because they're interested in it, because they have a family member that did it, because they feel a sense of purpose with it. They feel a duty to act. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
See how I fit that in there?
Love it.
So we never really think of ourselves as needing to market. What does your marketing knowledge, what does using social media for marketing get us in public service agencies?
Well, the world is hyper competitive these days. You're competitive for people's attention. And you no longer live in a place where the fire service, as an example, can rely on the brand, so to speak, of firefighters and firefighting as a category, because there's so many competing ideas out there and so many competing interests, and every Gen Z person wants to be an influencer these days, that kind of thing. So it's really important to leverage the modern public square to remain top of mind for people, and honestly, just generally show who you are and what you do and what your department is all about, because the community will be interested in that. The community at large will be interested in that.
And this is what we used to get when we would go into the schools and do, touch the bunker gear and come out and tour the engines. Mm-hmm. And what we used to get when there were parades or with fire stations on the town square and sitting out front and waving to people. Yeah,
it's the exact same thing, except it's just now in a digital format. And it can be a little bit more intimate in that way because, as we'll talk about, I'm sure there's all manner of content examples or content ideas that can be used that can make this really interesting and really intimate for people who are interested in the fire service in general, and may even be interested in joining the team.
Okay. And so recruitment, we can use social media to help us with recruitment.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. 100% you can. Okay.
So when you talk about marketing, you have to talk about brand, about having a brand. And mm-hmm. Our brand in law enforcement is they're brave and they're looking out for people. They're safety and security. This is what that brand is. Right. Or firefighting, you get brave again, but red trucks and black helmets and rescuing cats out of trees. Yeah. First responders, EMS. People who know how to manage emergencies. So we already kind of have a brand. So what kind of branding do we need to do to distinguish ourselves so that we're not just the fire department?
Well, there's kind of a difference between it. I like to think of that as more of a categorical brand. Okay. It's like we understand what it means, as you just laid out, what it means to be a firefighter or an EMS provider or a police officer or something. They're the people you call when things go wrong, right? And so then it's like, all right, well, if that is the brand of the category of a police officer, for example, then we can narrow that down and say, what does it mean then to be the subset of police officer in our town or our city. And that requires having a discussion. It requires laying some foundation, because when folks talk about brand, inevitably it comes to logos and colors and font types and that sort of thing.
Right.
And that's all fun and it is important, but it's the icing on the cake. It's not the cake. You have to actually make the foundation. You have to make the cake. And making the cake is the mission and values and vision, and living that mission, values, and vision, communicating that interdepartmentally within the ranks, and living that and communicating that externally with the community and with city leadership. And it's sort of synonymous with reputation in that way, right? It all comes down to knowing who you are, communicating who you are, and living that ethos. And then the things that we think of as brand, logos and such, are reflections of that.
Okay. All right. We've talked about voice in the past and establishing a voice for your department. So help me understand voice as a social media attribute.
Well, again, going back to the brand. So if once you've laid this foundation, you know who you are, then you can sort of determine what it is how you want to communicate. So not necessarily what you're communicating. It's the how, in what manner. And you need to make a decision about your department. And this is, again, kind of a reflection of who you are internally, but it's also kind of a reflection of who you're speaking to externally. Do you want to be authoritative? Do you want to be educational? Do you want to be funny? Do you want to be some combination of those things, some kind of a mix of those things? And do you want to be serious all the time? Which that can work. And you need to make that decision, lay that out. And one marketing trick that I like to talk about is making a persona, and actually having a photograph of a person and writing out like a character profile and say, well, this is Sergeant Joe, and he represents the department, and he is born and raised in our town, and he's got a dry sense of humor, but he knows his stuff. And you sort of embody that persona when you're posting to social media on behalf of the department. Whatever that persona is, you just have to decide what that persona is.
Okay, and so when you say like imagining it's all sort of an imagination. It's an imagined character.
Yeah.
But it's important that it's based on somebody or something. Talk about Danny Rebellos, who was on the podcast, Everett Police Department. Mm-hmm. He is authentically himself in his posts, and the police department has embraced him. So in some ways, he is absolutely authentic, and in other ways, he's a character.
Yeah. Well, okay. And you bring up a good point about authenticity, because this is not intended to be inauthentic, which is why it's rooted in all of these things about who you are. You need to know who you are first. And then you can have a authentic persona. Mm-hmm. And if you are lucky, and maybe you can even target this within your recruitment, but if you are lucky, you have someone in the department who lives that ethos, has a great voice, and would be a great representative to the community, and that person embodies all of those values. And Danny is one of those people.
Yeah.
He makes great social media. He's a clever guy. He's got he takes great photos, and he knows how to post and when to post, and he's practiced it. That's the other thing. Like, this is not a thing you can just do overnight, which it seems that way because it's so simple, but it really does take some practice to get kind of good at it.
So the example that you talked to me about is the TSA. So tell me how TSA is really nailing persona.
Yeah. Their persona is funny and informative, educational, and I would put a tablespoon of snark.
Okay.
For example, there was a post there today, and usually their posts are full of puns and like dad jokey kind of things.
Super dad jokey.
Like super dad jokey and full of puns. And like if that's the brand you want to run with, awesome. Some people appreciate puns. Some people don't. Today I saw a post from TSA, not a pun in sight. It just simply said, "Stop putting reptiles down your pants, please." And it was a picture of a turtle on the floor that apparently, I guess the backstory is somebody stuffed a turtle down their pants and tried to go through TSA, which is insane.
Nice.
But that's their thing. They have photos, almost exclusively image, which is interesting because the algorithms are prioritizing video, but they're almost exclusively images, and the images are just insane. Mm-hmm. And they have the benefit of having these insane images, and then they pair it with, they make a pairing with puns and dad jokes, or just a simple ridiculous line like "Stop putting reptiles down your pants."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think they're particularly successful. I've always impressed with them. Mm-hmm. And my understanding, I read about this. One of my school projects, I read about this, and basically that started because of a single individual whose responsibility was posting, and his personality came out in his postings.
Yeah.
That's how he came out. And then he's not doing it anymore, from what I understand, but they have continued with that persona. So the people that they've hired to do that job are staying true to that persona.
Yeah. So let's go back to Danny Rebellos for a second.
Sure.
If Danny Rebellos is going to retire or leave the department or something, and they wanted to continue doing it, it would be in their best interest to hire someone who is as similar as possible to him, mm-hmm. Which might be hard to find, and then have that person shadow him for a long time. Mm-hmm. Like, and maybe even take down and create a persona. Like, mm-hmm. this is Danny. Mm-hmm. We're going to try and post. We're going to try and embody the spirit of Danny after he's retired.
Sure.
And that's a challenge. That's a real challenge. Mm-hmm. That's a benefit of having this persona written down, and then trying to look for people who can sort of train their way into it, act their way into it, because it's kind of acting in a way.
Yeah. And we talked about authenticity, and I will say a couple things about Danny. For those who haven't listened to that podcast episode, I highly recommend it. He's a very interesting guy. But a couple things about Danny is that he had a rocky history as a teenager, mm-hmm. and a police officer impacted him in his life and made him believe that he could become a police officer, and he could fix the world as a police officer and make the world better. And that's how Danny got started. Danny's also a very, very interesting individual. He took up photography, and so he takes beautiful pictures, and he puts a lot of thought into the pictures that he takes and posts them. Mm-hmm. And finally, Danny is covered in some crazy good superhero tattoos.
Yeah.
So they don't need to hire somebody who's tattooed. They don't need to get somebody tattooed who gets the job. They need to have somebody who's got that sort of personal interest in something out loud. Danny is out loud.
Yeah.
And that's the personality, out loud, motivated intrinsically by his history,
yes.
affected by an individual who stepped into his life.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
that's what they need to be. They don't need to put on some fake tattoos and photograph themselves standing up against a wall looking tough.
Yeah, arm crossed and stuff. Yeah. And that's exactly right, because we're not trying to say that you should create a persona and be contrived. You need to create a persona that is rooted in the in the department's ethos, mm-hmm. and that way it's as authentic as possible. Yeah,
I think we've had some fun talking about this, and so I have two personas to sort of put people in mind of, and imagine what those two personas might look like, talking about their own agency. So persona number one, I'm going to use Mount Vernon, and I'm going to regret this. I know I'm going to regret this when I go to work the next time. But imagine that Mount Vernon has decided that the persona that they want to put is they want the world according to an old lady who decides to go through the fire academy, right? So the world basically according to Jennifer, and then it would be the postings would be Jennifer's struggles as she learns to raise a big tall ladder, or Jennifer getting to go through the obstacle course in an engine going through the serpentine backwards, right? And so that's the persona, and it would be me, right? It would be my personality and my view on things. And for whatever reason, that appealed to Mount Vernon as an outward way of showing what our department culture is like, who we are as a group, seen through the persona of Jennifer. Now, I'm not volunteering for this position. I'm not suggesting this position, but you can see that that's a particular viewpoint.
Yeah.
Now,
and it'd also be hilarious.
I think of me driving the ladder truck backwards through a serpentine. I have done that. It is funny.
Yeah.
And so then an alternative persona to take would be that of Matt Beach. So Matt Beach was on a very early episode. He was one of a couple guys I work with that came on the episode, and super funny. Matt Beach has the driest sense of humor on the planet. Like your mouth, you can't even make words. It's so dry, like Sahara desert dry sense of humor. And so that could be the embodiment or the persona that Mount Vernon puts on. And so Matt's view of the world, embodying our ethos, but in his incredibly desert dry perspective.
Yeah, I think either one could be great. It would, again, it's just the department would need to make a decision, like who do we want to be and how do we want to present ourselves, and given these two choices, which which would we want to do, and I think they both have their merits. I think they both would be hilarious, and I think they would both be very very educational. I think you could do some really interesting stuff on the medical side, because you're probably the most qualified paramedic in the history of paramedics.
You have to say that.
I don't have to say that. I think that's true. You have like every certification there is, but there, so it could be really interesting how you are sort of working your way, learning your way through the fire stuff, and then also, and yet, as a medical professional on the medical side, you're a legend. So it's
all right. We're gonna move on past this.
But I'm just saying, it's like that juxtaposition could be
there's
really.
Gonna be this moment where the chief is like, Jennifer said, "What?
Yeah,
she wants to be what?
Yeah,
we're just gonna walk away from this."
So that juxtaposition could be really be really compelling.
Yeah, so it's just the kind of the tone that you take is your department ethos, and then the voice that you use is the persona.
Yeah, and if you do have a juxtaposition in there, that's really great, because I mean that's why comedy works. It's this subversion of expectations. So you have a person who's clumsy in one area, but they're brilliant. That's why we all love the absent-minded professor. Yeah, right.
And in the case of Danny Rebellos and the gentleman who started posting for the TSA, it is absolutely 1,000,000% genuine. They both were drawn to those jobs. They both started posting, and they both became. They became online what they are in person, and that's really cool. So let's move off of voice for a second. Let's start talking about content and the kind of content that you think is important for public service agencies. So think of emergency departments, fire, police, EMS, first responders, volunteer, paid, whatever.
I would categorically, I think of 3 types.
Okay.
And this is not an exhaustive list. I'm sure we sit down and brainstorm, but I sort of think like 3 big buckets. One would be a community engagement kind of bucket.
Okay.
The police officer who stops to play basketball with the kids in the street or something.
Okay.
Right. That kind of community engagement bucket. The day in the life bucket.
Okay.
What does it look like to be a police officer or a firefighter, and getting down to like the nitty gritty. Like I've been just sitting here radaring people for 20 minutes, and I'm just bored out of my mind or something because not catching any speeders, or I have to go check all the hoses. Let's go check all the hoses together, and I'll show you what that's like. Like that kind of thing. And then the time around the station, the family meal, the Sunday dinner kind of stuff, make a cooking show out of it. So that would be all day in the life.
Okay.
And then of course, awesome training videos. And I don't mean awesome training videos that are just nonstop slow motion, fire and hoses and stuff. But it could be
like 1980s video music in the background, like da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Well, I mean, if you're doing that now, you've stumbled onto like a theme, and that's a little different.
Okay, all right. So,
but I'm talking about like because everybody does like the 10-minute long epic video montage, with rock music or something, and no, I mean like slapping a helmet cam on and then diving out of a window and just showing it just that from that perspective without any context.
So doing the bailout
like
drill
doing
and
the
letting
bailout
people
drill.
experience that clattering down the ladder kind of moment.
Exactly. Or throwing the helmet cam on and then going through the maze, the crawl spaces and stuff. And or setting up a camera inside of the burn room ahead of time, right? And then lighting it on fire, and then just getting a video of folks just going in and throwing it down, or getting a perspective for a police officer. You can easily get the little 360 camera that we're using just right there, right? That little guy, and stick it to the dog collar and have them run up and bite the guy in the big suit. And get that from the perspective of the dog, that kind of thing. And you don't even have to have context around it. It's just a wild looking video from an interesting perspective. And it's 30 seconds long, and people are going to watch it over and over and over because they want to see what happened.
And the algorithms with social media really play to video, right? If you post a video, it's more likely to go wider than a still photo or a text meme, like a meme.
Right. And by and large, people will spend more time with a video than they will with an image, because that's just the very nature of the video. If a video is 30 seconds, somebody watches it all the way through. I mean, how long do you spend on an image post? You look at it, you digest it real quick, and then you swipe away. You can do that in like 5 seconds or so.
Okay.
But you have a 30-second video or a 1-minute video of something wild happening on the training grounds. Now that person has engaged with your account and your department for 30 seconds or a full minute.
Okay.
And that's a different thing.
Okay. There's a movie out called The Social Dilemma. It's a documentary about social media, and in the video, and I can't think of the attribution right now, but they said, a goldfish has an 8-second attention span and a human being has a 7-second attention span now, thanks to social media.
I don't buy that.
Yeah.
I don't buy that because of how popular the Joe Rogan podcast is when it's 3 hours long, and the Sean Ryan show, which is 5 hours often, and so many other similarly formatted podcasts that are hours long. So
Okay.
I don't buy that. I think it is the nature of the social media space is just sort of engaging and moving on. There's kind of an energy to it. There's a speed factor to it, but I don't think it's a function of people's attention span. I think it's a function of the platform itself.
Okay.
So,
All right. So, what are some things to avoid, some content to avoid?
patient videos.
Okay, well, I mean, yeah, we'll
one.
talk about policy for sure.
I mean,
but yeah,
like, yeah,
illegal videos.
Yeah,
Let's just
illegal
cover that.
videos. Right. Don't do that sort of stuff. But anything that would not show the department in a good light, and anything that would make your grandma blush.
Okay.
Anything that could possibly be discoverable in the court of law. Mm-hmm. I think that kind of covers 90% of it right there. I've mentioned we've talked before about the recent case of the Alaska Airlines flight attendant. Sorry, flight attendant who was twerking on the airplane in her uniform, and Alaska Airlines fired her for it. It's like, well, you're you can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't do that in uniform. Maybe do that sort of thing on your own time, but not at your workplace in uniform. Come on.
And we have a lot of standing rivalries like police versus fire and so on. And like the wrong thing to do would be for the firefighters to go stand on a police car and twerk, videotape it and send it.
Right.
Yeah, that's disrespectful to the machines. That's not in the best taste. It's in poor taste.
Yeah.
And I don't think you gain a lot. That's just not funny enough. To lose a job,
and
right?
There might be, you might get charged with some kind of vandalism or something.
Yeah, that's just not funny enough.
Malicious mischief. Yeah.
All right. Fads.
I'm not a fan.
Okay.
And I'm not a fan because they feel contrived.
Mm-hmm.
And with stuff like the Ice Bucket Challenge, there apparently was some sort of donations about that, but it's real sketchy about where the donations ended up going and things. So I tend to steer clear of them. And a lot of them are dumb things that'll get people hurt, like the Tide Pods stuff and the drinking a gallon of milk as fast as you can. Mm-hmm. I think if you got a little rivalry, sort of just have a rivalry online. But I don't know. I say steer clear of fads. I understand your position is maybe a little different. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear your reasoning, see if you can convince me. But I'm not a fan of fads personally.
Yeah, I think right off the bat we can rule out any sort of fads that will cause people physical harm or death. Like right off the bat, that's not funny.
Yeah.
And I think that the Ice Bucket Challenge, I do know that some things, the kind of wheels came off the bus on that one a little bit. But at the same time, that was one agency or a person giving a shout out to another person and challenging them to pour a bucket of ice water over themselves.
Yeah, it's sort
of harmless. In the grand scheme, it's fairly harmless. Right. It engaged a lot of people. And again, that sort of friendly rivalry is a good thing. Just one department talking to another.
Sure.
It's something that people notice. So I'm okay with that. I think I have to tell you, I've told you this before, my favorite of all the fads, and maybe this isn't even quite no, I'm going to go with fad. I absolutely love anytime somebody pulls all of their apparatus out, decorates them with Christmas lights, waits till nighttime, puts on some music, and does choreographed lights with the apparatus. That for me is like Mannheim Steamroller, and I'm in AC/DC, and I'm in, and I'll just search those out all year round.
Yeah, that's definitely a great. I don't know if I'd call it a fad or not, but it's certainly a cool genre. And what's not what's not to like? It's just
that's an interesting point.
It's just cool.
It's not. I'm sorry to cut you off, but it's an interesting point, though. Maybe there's something that's different than a fad. Maybe that's. Yeah, it's not a trend, but
I think of a fad as like something you just see like a bunch of people catching on, and it's here and it's gone tomorrow. It's here today, it's gone tomorrow, right? So I think that's I would characterize that as a genre as opposed to a fad, but it's definitely cool, right? Yeah. It's definitely cool. There was a fad for a little while of people who were taking selfies hanging off the edge of a skyscraper. They would like climb outside of the building or on top of the building and hang off the edge of the building or off of a crane, like illegally climb up on tall things. I don't know how many. I'm sure people died doing that. I don't know how many. Just don't.
Yeah. Now, if your department is rappelling off of the top of something for
that
training,
would be awesome,
right? I think one of the coolest things is when Seattle Fire goes up to the top of the Space Needle and they rappel off the Space Needle, like they traverse the outside of the Space Needle. They do that? Yes, they do. Yep.
Are you serious?
Yeah. If you
throw on a helmet cam when you do that,
right? Exactly,
and break out a drone. That would be sick.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's very cool.
I had no idea that they did that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that they rappel drop completely to the ground off the sides, but they go out and train on the Space Needle.
What?
Yeah. How cool is that?
I literally had never heard of that until just now.
We'll have to look into that. We'll have to see if we can find somebody who can talk to us.
If you're
about
doing that kind of stuff, helmet
maybe
cam.
we'll just do some research on our own and talk about it. So we're definitely going to avoid offending grandma, and I would say If your grandma is hard to offend, maybe think of your friend's grandma who is easily offended.
Yeah. I mean, the categorical grandma.
Yeah. And we should actually talk about that, about the audience, because we'll talk about the platforms in a minute, but the reach, the audience that you're speaking to, the social media that we're talking about activating your community through social media. We're not talking about speaking to other fire, police, or EMS agencies.
Right.
We're not talking about ER nurses from one ER to the other talking to each other. We're talking about outward communication to your community. And so who's the community that's viewing these things?
Yeah. And that's another great time to apply a persona. And one way to do that, just thinking off the top of my head here, is that you could take the city demographics for wherever you live, and from those demographics construct a persona that is representative of the community, broadly speaking, and then say, give this character a name, and even find a picture online that you think maybe fits what that looks like. And then when you're making a social media post or thinking about creating content, you are creating content for that person, or you are speaking directly to that person. Yeah, that can be really effective. I've done that at marketing agencies when working on advertising for, let's say like a video game company or something like that. It's like, okay, well, I know that I'm talking to a guy who's, minimally employed between 18 and 25, and like that's the demographic for this particular game. So let's give that person a persona and speak to them in that tone of voice.
That's that's a really good thing. And actually, if you think about what you said earlier, that the type of content that's interesting to post, there's a day in the life. There's a community engagement sort of thing. And then there's the training videos. Well, if you put up a recruitment video, you're definitely looking for that post-high school, usually, but post-high school.
Right.
Career-oriented, somebody who's exploring or seeking. You're trying to distinguish your department from other departments. And so that video, you should have broad appeal because it's going up on your page. But that's the audience for that video.
Yeah.
And then a day in the life, that's going to be sort of the average consumer of social media. That could be of any age group. But
it still ends up informing that recruit's decision, right? Because if they see a day in the life, and then they're going to be like, oh, now I know sort of kind of what it means to mop the engine bay floor or something.
But you could actually target things at different age groups, though. I was thinking there's some events that are like Touch a Truck Day. And so on a Saturday, the city of Marysville pulls all of their trucks, engines, ambulances, whatever they can spare, trash trucks, plows, and everything. And they park them in a parking lot, and they invite the community to come out and literally touch a truck. And so, that's for kids, right? They want the kids to come out, but it's cool as heck.
I'd go to that.
I'd go to that. Well, exactly. But you think about it, there's a demographic there of parents with kids, and that's going to engage them and pull them in and look what they're doing and look what a great thing this is. So you've got the content. We know what we're not putting up. How are we getting that content? And specifically, explain crowdsourcing for content.
So this sort of touches on post frequency here, and which I think we might end up talking about. But
I think we're going to talk about that. I think that's how we're going to finish the end, because I think that's the biggest take home, I think.
Okay.
But anyway, crowdsourcing.
Yeah. Well, crowdsourcing the content, the TSA is a great example of this, where they have they have all of these people everywhere they find stuff at their local airport while they're on shift, and they take a photo of it. They send it back to whoever manages. I'm sure that there's just a repository somewhere where they just dump tons and tons of images from the shifts, and and then the team probably sifts through all that energy. That would be crowdsourcing. So if you had a police department and everyone at the police department, 'cause they all have cell phones, right? Everyone at the police department is free to take a video or take an image and dump it into a repository somewhere, so that way the person who is in charge of the social media can collect from it, because it takes way more content than you think is necessary to be like truly active, so to speak. And you want to have more content than necessary, because you want to be able to pick out the gems. Because, let's be honest, so like 80% of it's going to be sort of junk, that kind of thing. And that's just sort of the nature of the whole, the nature of the beast. On the other end of the spectrum, there's someone like Danny or the team from San Jose.
I'm glad you brought that up. So San Jose, Vasily.
They are dedicated to this,
Yeah.
and they have a team that does nothing but this,
Yeah.
right? It's just like that's their thing. And that's harder because you may not be able to afford to have one person on the team whose job, like half their time or more, is taken up with creating social media content. And you don't really see a benefit necessarily from the social media content until suddenly there's a need to activate that community. And then you see the value pretty quick. But anyway, so it helps to have the whole team involved, or as many people as possible involved, and then sending images in. You can even ask people in the community to send images and photos or images and videos in. Like, talk about the community engagement thing. If you have a public repository where people can send videos, you're going to get all kinds of crazy videos, just to say it. You're going to get all kinds of nonsense and inappropriate things. But, the spontaneous times when the police officer plays hockey out in the street for a few minutes, take some time out of the shift to do that, and engage with some folks on the basketball court or whatever it is. There's going to be people there who are taking videos and all that. And if they know that they can send that in, or if that officer says, hey, if you swipe this QR code or snap this QR code, and then you can send that video in, or if you would please send that video to me because I'd love to send it into the team. Like, then you're crowdsourcing the content, and that content can go into, like I said, into a repository where it can be sifted through to find all the gems and then posted by the social media team.
Very nice. And one thing that Vasily and the team at San Jose do is, you mentioned like playing to your community or speaking to your community. They actually publish videos in multiple different languages. So they have Chinese, I think Vietnamese. I believe the languages he said is there's a Chinese speaking provider at the department, a Vietnamese speaking provider at the department, Spanish speaking provider at the department. And so they'll make videos, and those providers are willing, he's already prearranged this, they're willing to make these videos and, put them in different languages, which is really amazing.
That's really cool. And if you don't have that, let's say you have that need, but you don't have that, talent in-house, artificial intelligence is doing some pretty amazing stuff, translating on the fly. So you could take a video that's in English and then translate it into whatever
like
language.
Closed captioning?
No.
Like,
it will be your voice speaking a different language.
I'm scared about that. It might be the way of the future, but I'm scared about that.
Look, I mean, it freaks me out too, and I work in this stuff. It freaks me out too, but it's pretty interesting.
Okay.
And it's really interesting to see some historical videos that are in other languages that have been translated into English, and it's that person's voice but speaking English with the very similar intonation and things. You can listen to historical speeches and stuff in English. It's kind of a wild thing.
Okay. Well, I think that's probably a really good time to segue into policy then. So what are some, and I should say, this is one of those moments where you are very Silicon Valley public sector in your thinking, and I'm very what's the saying at Facebook?
Break things and move fast and break
Move fast
things.
and break
Yeah.
things, right? And so for
Not particularly risk averse.
not particularly risk averse, and then public service, we're very risk averse, right? Risk a little to save a little, risk a lot to save a lot. And posting on social media, no matter how much it gets us, it doesn't get us enough to make it worthwhile to post risky videos or to go too far out on a limb.
Yeah.
But so I know that it's important. I think for me, the first thought that comes to mind is about having a policy on what gets posted, who does the posting, and sort of that sort of thing. What are some things that you think of when it comes to policy?
You're absolutely right about that, or at least have some sort of an agreement, and also setting up the account appropriately, so that way there's multiple people with admin permissions and things. Because if Danny is the only person who has permissions on the Everett Instagram account, and then Danny retires, and well, now they don't have access to their Instagram account, so you can set that all up in the back end. The thing that really comes to mind for me, aside from that, is a content moderation or a comment moderation policy, and knowing and for yourself, and then communicating publicly what the limitations are. And I know this can be sort of subjective, because people think of, there's, freedom of speech issues or whatever, that kind of stuff. But the fact of the matter is, it's your account, and you can close the door to people who are behaving badly, and you get to determine what behaving badly means. So determine ahead of time your comment moderation policy, because there's loads of people on there who, they may not even be people. They might just be bots who are just trying to drum up activity. Then again, they may be real community members who are engaging with your stuff. So there's value of sifting through there, and there's also should put a warning on that says don't necessarily take it too seriously when someone has a negative content or a negative comment, especially if it's sort of baseless and silly. So just use your sense.
Again, during school, I was working on this, and there's a fairly recent publication from HubSpot. Can you say what HubSpot is?
They're just a content management system, basically, yeah.
So HubSpot does research on what's going on social media, and they said that among nonprofit organizations, sorry, I'm getting my numbers wrong here. Hang on. Less than 30% of nonprofits actually have a policy for their social media postings.
Yeah.
Now, public service is in a different category than nonprofit, but that's who we most closely resemble when online. And so if your agency doesn't have policies about this, then you're just opening yourself up to a lot of liability and a lot of bad things going on.
Yeah, you're sort of doing yourself a disservice by not just stating up from the get-go where you decide to draw the line in the sand.
Sure. And having a disclaimer that comments don't necessarily reflect the city of, or the comments don't necessarily reflect the department of.
Sure. And that's, and that's one of the things, one of the benefits of being active and developing a relationship with the community through the social media by posting regularly and having a good interactions with folks, being authentic, all these things that we've talked about, is that when a nut job does come on to the social media and says something that is baseless and crazy, the community will activate itself and rally around you and say, hey, no, we know these people, get out of here. You're not just stop it.
And by establishing that goodwill, I mean, that's with your postings, with engaging your community, you're establishing this goodwill equity.
Yeah, you're established. Yeah, you've built a relationship, and remember, it doesn't take much to ruin that relationship, right? But if you have a good, strong relationship, you can activate that relationship either deliberately or allow it to activate itself.
You make a really good point about having more than one person who has access to the account. And I would hazard a guess that Danny Rebellos, looking at his for a second, he is the primary poster, but I'm sure at least one of his superiors or perhaps an admin has access, so that if something has to be taken down while Danny's on vacation, or the ability to post while Danny's not available at that moment, they have that. And I had a specific experience at one of the contracts that we were working on, where the social media, a person left their job under bad circumstances and was not content. And that person still had access to social media. It was the only access to Facebook specifically. And the person vented their frustrations about leaving their job in a very public, inflammatory way on Facebook. And I had
on the official account.
Right. Not their personal account, but on the official account.
Yeah, you can rant into the heavens on your personal account all you want.
Yeah, and I had a really tough week of phone calls from fire chief after fire chief after fire chief, and the FBI got involved. And do we take down the postings? Do we leave them up? It looks really bad to leave them up, but if they stay up, then it's evidence of a crime. That is, that's something that the person had no right to do. And we also couldn't access the account. And it was just one of those things. The person left the job. The last thing that you think about is turn in your keys, clean out your desk, and change the lead for Facebook or Instagram to somebody else.
Yeah.
So that was a tough week. And
I would say you have a couple of people from the city IT department who are just admins. And they don't have to post. They don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like these people are admins on there. And then when Sergeant Joe leaves the thing, you call up Sally in IT and say, hey, so and so retired. Will you please remove them from the Facebook and or from all the social media accounts? And then they click a couple of buttons and it's done. Yeah. And it's an IT person who's not, a part of the department, so to speak, or whatever. They just have an admin permissions on there for this kind of level of control.
Right.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. I like just reliving that week of what got posted, and it was multiple postings. Yeah. That was not my favorite. So, okay. So we've talked our way through policy. We've talked our way through postings. Let's talk about, there's a lot of P's here now that I'm saying it. Platforms. What platforms are out there? What should people be posting on? And you have an interesting idea of one that I didn't ever think about. Yeah.
There's obviously, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and each of these serve different purposes, right? So, X has really become like a journalistic town square and is a great place for announcements, that kind of thing. Instagram, also a great place for announcements, but it's also a great place for fun videos and fun images. You can easily set it up. I think that automatically by default it sets up your Instagram account where it posts on Instagram and Facebook. You just have to link those two accounts, and then you post on one and it automatically posts on the other. So, hey, that saves you a little bit of hassle. YouTube is a really great place for shorts, what they call them, shorts, videos that are up to 3 minutes long. They're called hashtag shorts, and those are really fun. The one that comes to mind that I have a hunch is well underutilized by public service agencies is Nextdoor, and it's because the people who are on Nextdoor are literally in your community unlike on Facebook and Instagram and all the other places where they may or may not be directly in your community. They might be all over the world. And, that's fine. That's not a real problem. But sometimes you really want to talk to the community itself, like to your neighbors. And next door, by the very design of the platform, they are the neighbors of the department. They're in your community. So I think departments need to leverage that, especially with recruitment and community outreach.
Okay, what's the value of something like Pinterest?
I mean, Pinterest is, it's images. Mm-hmm. Those images last forever. I mean, you got a really, really cool set of images on there. Images. So Pinterest is used for inspiration, mm-hmm. and it's a really great place to post images that someone might find inspiring, and to make a collection of inspiring things. That can be repurposed as an educational tool. So if you have memes that explain medical things, for example, then someone could use that as like a study tool, make a collage of memes that are informative about medical things, and sort of use it in a card, a flashcard kind of way.
Okay.
Right? They could be used sort of like that. And that's kind of the purpose. So it's like, if you think about it that way, you have an idea about a local nonprofit that can use Pinterest to reach out to volunteers.
Yeah, I'm so excited. We're going to be actually meeting with them next week to record a podcast episode. But it's an organization called
Hooves and Heroes.
Hooves and Heroes. And I just go to Horses and Heroes, or Hooves and Horses. It is Hooves and Heroes. And it is an amazing nonprofit local to us that works with veterans and first responders, and they do equine therapy. And so horses, they've got horses, which are a fan favorite for people to get inspiration and collect things.
Yeah. And
for them, that's not necessarily social media with regard to gaining clientele, but actually for fundraising. Mm-hmm. And it's not even that people are going to see a picture of the horse and donate money, but it's more, it'd be in people's frame of mind.
Right.
It would put them in front of the pictures in front of them and make them think about it in a different way.
It's brand building.
It's brand building. And then maybe when they get a corresponding posting on Facebook or something, then the call to action for donations or volunteers is there. And so that's pretty cool. So I want to talk about the longevity of postings. And this is the way I understand it, again, from a little bit of research and working on it in school. But the longest lived social media content out there is on YouTube, because it will go up on YouTube and stay for years.
Yeah, and you'll get served content that may be years old. Mm-hmm. So, as a matter of fact, today I was looking at YouTube. I was looking at some guitar videos or something, and just on my feed there was two videos right next to each other, and one came out yesterday and the other one came out 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. Both of which were relevant to me, and YouTube served them both up. Yeah. So,
and I think San Jose was doing a great job with YouTube videos. Mm-hmm. I think any department that makes any type of video and then doesn't have a YouTube page and says like, well, we're posting on Facebook, we're posting on Instagram, that's where our audience is, that's where we're fast and speedy. But create a catalog on YouTube, because it'll always be there.
Yeah, and it doesn't take that much extra time to repost something on YouTube or on Rumble. Rumble is an emerging platform that is quickly becoming a threat to YouTube, so to speak, from a business perspective. And yeah, it doesn't take that much longer to set up an account, and then just, if you're going to fire it off on one, you might as well fire it off on all of them.
Okay. So on YouTube, you get years of mileage. On Facebook, you get weeks of mileage, like 1-2 weeks
days,
of mileage.
days or weeks.
Days to weeks of mileage. So you post a really fun training video, the bailout drill with a helmet cam, something like that, or your police officer stops and joins in a kids band, plays the drums with a band, kids band for a little while, something like that. You get a couple weeks out of that. And then you get to Instagram and you get minutes.
Yeah.
You get TikTok and you get seconds.
Right.
Because once you scroll off of that, you're never going to find it again. You have to save it or you're just never going to find it again. And so people will see it and unless it makes a huge impact on them, not just an impact, but a huge impact, the chances of saving it are pretty limited or forwarding it.
Yeah.
So
I like to think of it like this way. So, I used to be in the restaurant industry, and so I like to think of it like this. It doesn't take it takes a heck of a lot for someone to leave you a good review. It doesn't take a whole lot for people to leave you a bad review. But most people, 95% of people, are going to leave you no review at all. And it's the same thing with social media content. It's 90% of it people are going to see, and they're going to watch it and won't engage with it. They'll see it and pass right on. And you'll only recognize that by looking at the impressions data. It doesn't take very much for someone to leave a bad comment, but it's going to have to be something really spectacular for them to share the post or comment on it. Mm-hmm. It's the exact same thought process of leaving a review for a restaurant on Google or something.
Okay. But a smart agency will post on multiple sites or will harness multiple sites.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think create a YouTube catalog of videos and put them out on Facebook, link it to Instagram, and you've got a lot of mileage there.
Tons.
But let's talk about
and
planning.
It can be repurposed. Yeah. So
yeah. So let's talk about planning. How often should people be posting or agencies be posting?
So in an ideal world, you'd be posting every day, every other day, but we're not in an ideal world when we're dealing with the agencies and such. First responder agencies have a tendency of being dead quiet until suddenly a levy needs to get passed, or they want them to call their city council or something, and then it's a flurry, and then it's dead quiet again. And that's not the way to do it. So ideally, every day, every other day, something like that. But frankly, if we're going from 0 to just 3 posts a week, like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday or something, like that's a win, right? Yeah. You're at least headed in the right direction. You're at least heading in the right direction.
Yeah. So, for example, we spoke earlier about the content and what we might post. So Wheels Wednesday, and then you post something about one of the vehicles, and Medical Monday, and you give a health tip, and then, Super Duper Saturday, I have no idea.
Yeah,
But a training day, something like that, and you get on sort of a plan for something like that.
Yeah, if that's what helps you, keep posting on a regular basis, having those kind of themes, all more power to you.
Yeah.
Go for it.
And you also make a really good point there about the silence. So I've worked with an organization trying to get a levy, and the social media has been underutilized. And I confess that, in the time that I worked, I did not know enough about marketing and social media brand and cultivating these relationships. But the levy goes every 6 years. And so at 5 years and 11 months, the social media, which has been dormant all that time, suddenly spools up and starts sending out content like vote for the levy, and this is what the levy means. And that's really wonderful. The problem is that the 2,000 people that have liked that page already know that the levy's coming, are already fans of the levy, are already going to vote. And you're not getting those people that still need to be informed, that still need to be engaged on the topic. And so a better plan for this organization would be to have some sort of posting regularity.
Yeah.
And if they only post for 1 month every 6 years, then maybe content doesn't have to be daily, weekly, or even monthly, but there has to be more to it.
Right.
Maybe a follow-up, your tax dollars at work.
Yeah.
Something that keeps people. So the more active the agency is, the more attention they're going to get.
Yeah. And you don't have to make it a giant production. Not every post needs to be a big production. You can just be with cell phone video and stuff. It can be very easy, very low tech, and no budget.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And that will also help get more content out. And it's just it's like working out. If you work out once a week really hard for a couple of hours, like that's actually not doing you all that much good as opposed to 20 minutes a day, right? So it's just these little bits over a long period of time and developing that relationship. And like you were saying, if you're out there, people know who you are, and then you can activate the community because you have a levy that's going to be passed. Now you're in people's feeds all the time. They know who you are. They know what you're about. Now it's time for you to make an ask. They're going to be on your side, and it's going to be more than 2,000 people, and because they've developed a relationship with you, because you're sort of online friends in a way.
All right. This was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yep. Okay. Let's call it there.
All right, let's go.
All right. Thanks.